Let's take a look at some more of the international reaction to the ceasefire. The UK's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said that all sides must work to make the ceasefire durable and to end the cycle of violence. Pakistan's Foreign Ministry called for the mobilisation of humanitarian aid to Gaza and called for a revival of concrete efforts to end Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. And the President of the UN's General Assembly welcomed the ceasefire and is calling for the reconstruction of Gaza.
We must address critical humanitarian needs of the Palestinians. This includes mobilizing support for UNRWA and rebuilding vital public infrastructure that has been destroyed, particularly in Gaza. We have been at this unfortunate juncture too many times. This latest flare-up did not happen in a vacuum. This is not an isolated occurrence, and it cannot be divorced from the broader context of this decades-long issue, including the protracted military occupation of the Palestinian territories.
Rami Khouri is Director of Global Engagement at the American University of Beirut. He joins us now live from New York. Good to have you with us once again. Rami, we were talking to a guest a little earlier, a mother in Gaza, about the ceasefire. She said, it isn't over. We've got a ceasefire, but it isn't over. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's correct. The ceasefire is really important to end the military action and the human suffering, which has disproportionately, the suffering has been in Gaza, and the firepower disproportionately has come from Israel. The ceasefire is an indication of rising international anger and really disgust at the barbarism that the Israelis have used, and they've done it before. And this has happened before every time when it gets too much for people to take, where you get an entire family with 8 children, all of them die because they were bombed while they were sleeping at night. It gets too much, and then the pressure builds, and the pressure builds up inside the U.S. now, which is new to a certain extent on Biden, and the international public sphere. When it discusses Israel, it often talks about apartheid in the same breath. So these are all new elements which will reveal themselves in the coming weeks and months if they are part of a new phase that will maybe perhaps move to a negotiation that will address the underlying causes, which is what the mother was talking about, the siege of Gaza, the prohibition on travel, the extension of settlements and colonies, etc. This is something we have to keep our eye on.
With the pressure that he's coming under, do you think that Joe Biden is going to move to change U.S. policy towards the region?
Well, he certainly has the power to do that. We've seen it in previous presidents, from Eisenhower to others. George Bush the first and Baker did some novel things, Secretary of State Baker. So he has the power to do it. Whether he has the courage to do it or the fundamental depth of humanity to do it remains to be seen. His history is as a very pro-Israeli liberal Democrat. And that's a bad history for peacemaking, because the United States for 40 years has been the sole mediator and has achieved really nothing. But I really must point out that when I read the statement, I watched the Biden little press conference over the statement. You read that statement carefully. There was one sentence where twice he used the term, he twice used the term equal rights, equality, for freedom and development and on security between Israelis and Palestinians. That seems to me a slightly important new nuance. And this is something I've criticized the Americans for, is that they've never been able to fully equate the Israelis and Palestinians as people who have the same rights. So we may be seeing little hints of that. And the reason is not because the humanism of Biden is coming out, but it's because he was feeling the political pressure at home, and the Israelis were feeling the international pressure of being associated with apartheid South Africa.
And speaking of that international pressure, one thing is certain, a return to the status quo will not be acceptable, not only to Palestinians, but to much of the rest of the world, because there is this feeling that public opinion is shifting here.
That's correct. It is shifting. We're seeing many, many examples of it. The rest of the world doesn't really matter unless it translates its concern into action. And the one way that that may happen is through the international BDS sanctions, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement that Palestinian civil society has launched. And this is how South African apartheid was brought down, by sports and business and other people refusing to deal with the apartheid regime in South Africa. So if the international community takes action to back its words, we may see something really significant starting to happen. And then it's possible, not under the current Israeli and Palestinian leaderships, maybe under the American, we'll see, it's possible they might shift to a really serious peace negotiation under an international umbrella that must include the Americans, because the Israelis only trust the Americans. They don't trust anybody else. But the Americans are starting to show some nuanced little shifts. So there's a lot of moving parts here. Most of them are new. And we're going to have to wait, I would say, 2-3 months to really find out if this is the beginning of a new phase in which more rational leaders, more effective political action, more emphatic public protest movements around the world zero in on the problems that drive this conflict and have driven it for 100 years. And I would say focus on one thing: Israeli settlement expansion. That is, if the Israelis announce after 2 weeks approving more settlements, that's going to be the litmus test. If the Americans do nothing, or they just issue a statement, and the Israelis keep occupying land, annexing land, expelling Palestinians, doing more ethnic cleansing, that's going to be the key, because that has been the core of the conflict for the last 100 years, the land and the people on it. So that's where we should really keep our eyes.
Always good to talk to you, Rami. Many thanks indeed. Rami Khouri there via Skype from New York.